Dr. Adam Matthews with Matthews Counseling, and we have Sarha Machamer, one of our couples counselors, with us today. And all month we've been talking about emotional wellness and how to achieve that and get there. And so today we're going to talk about emotional wellness within a couple relationship. And this is Sarha, this is a really important one because of the importance of the emotional connection, strengthening the emotional connection within a couple relationship. So could you talk just a little bit about that importance? Like, why do you feel like emotional connection within a couple relationship is really important?
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam. It is immensely important for so many factors, but one, just creating that connection helps create a space to feel vulnerable with your partner. And that kind of breaks down into many different components just around that piece of vulnerability.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that, because that word vulnerability, we talk about it a lot, right? And I believe that without vulnerability, you can't really have an emotional connection with another person, right? It is impossible. You have to have some level of vulnerability. So do you agree with that? And if so,
Yeah.
Could you talk about what we mean when we talk about being vulnerable with another person?
So a big piece of that really, I think, comes down to safety, like being able to have that safety to be open, be yourself, and not have that fear of judgment or criticism, any of those other counterparts that come in to that.
Yeah.
So it is a big piece on just feeling safe, being able to open, connect, and be, I guess it's more of a freeing sense in that way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that I like what you said there about that idea of being able to be yourself and not fear that judgment, because that's really when I talk about intimacy with my couples, one of the things we talk about is that idea that intimacy is being able to be fully seen and fully known, right? That I can fully be myself, and that I can see the other person being able to be fully themselves. And I think that's in part what you're talking about there as well. I think then the other part of that vulnerability is being able to share deeply what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what the emotions are that are coming up without judgment as well, because that piece can be really scary to even tell our intimate partners about the depth of what we are feeling. We've talked a lot this month about how to know what you're feeling, but then being able to offer that to somebody else can be really challenging, right? Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen as kind of why is that so hard? On paper, it doesn't sound hard, but when we go to do it, it does, right? It is very, very difficult to kind of share deeply about what we're feeling internally.
There's so many different pieces when you are trying to open that and have that communication, that when you have that space to discuss these things, having that vulnerability that comes into play, it's different when you are able to give feedback, when you're able to talk about the harder things that you can avoid, that someone may also communicate to you and you internalize and not be able to look at that and how can we grow from this. So there is that big factor there that when you get feedback or trying to improve a relationship, try to communicate the harder things. That's where a lot of that double lines in. It's hard. You get into a gridlock situation. You can't seem to overcome those things. And that's where that vulnerability starts to build up those pieces of resentment. And those things kind of escalate from there.
Yeah, especially if we feel like the connection is going to be threatened, right? If we feel like sharing what we're really feeling, and I mean that takes a lot of work to really know what we're feeling deep down, but a lot of times we are not sharing completely because of that fear that it's either going to drive the other person away, make them upset, make things worse, in some way threaten the connection, right? And so that does. I like what you said too about the grid. It gets us into this gridlock that can be really, really challenging. So when we talk about how to move through that difficulty, that gridlock, that being able to trying to figure out how to share what we're feeling, what are some of the big things that you found to really be helpful for folks in trying to overcome this?
So a big part of that is you go up in those ups and downs. And it is that point where we look for that stability, that consistency. But this is the piece for the long term, working towards that aspect of knowing these are things that are in place that if you are able to continue to get into that normal routine to utilize, like that's going to bring that piece of consistency and stability. So actively listening to your partner, being able to be in the moment with them. We get caught up in every day, stuff going on, our minds all over the place, but to truly sit and listen, just that piece is so crucial in a relationship to be able to do that.
And I would add to that too, that active listening piece means that we're listening to understand rather than listening to respond. And really what you're saying is that to be able to for ourselves to be heard emotionally, we have to listen first.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's not what we want to do. So being able to listen to understand rather than listening to respond, it really opens things up to allow us to be heard as well, or to allow myself to be heard as well. I have to then listen and try to listen actively at first as well, right?
It's easy to get into that routine where we think, okay, they want me to fix it, or I'm just going to let them talk. They just need to vent. But that's why it's so important to actively listen to see how you can meet them of what the actual needs are.
Yeah, I always talk about too, like that a lot of times, and you're hitting on this, is that we get, to me, we get the cart before the horse a lot of times, where we try to solve the problem first rather than understand what our partner is feeling, or we try to when we do that, when we lead with like the transaction or the content, we're missing the boat rather than leading to try to understand what emotionally is happening. And that's really what the work that we have to do first, because that establishes that connection. And then we solve whatever is coming up, or try to solve whatever is.
I mean, think about just that situation of not having what the other person's feeling. Like they're feeling that sense of you getting into that repetitive behavior. So where's that vulnerability? How do you feel safe to open up and be able to then express some of those things?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and you can't get there. You can't get to there unless we have an understanding and a validation of the emotion that's happening, and we're making it safe enough for that emotion to be expressed. Then we can get that right. So I think that's fantastic. So active listening, that's huge, right? Listening to understand rather than listening to respond. What else can we do to kind of really strengthen that emotional connection in relationships?
So you did just kind of go into that piece of that validation, which another piece is empathy, right? Like being able to connect. So that's the major component of starting with active listening. You move into that validation, into that empathy, being able to connect that emotion. And a lot of times that's a big problem, because when we get into disagreements, we think empathy, like I have to agree with what they're saying. And I get that a lot when we talk about empathy, but it's really connecting that emotion, understanding what that means for them.
Yes. Yeah.
And then being able to connect on that piece.
I think that's huge, because we get confused on that. I think you're exactly right, that we think being empathetic means that we have to agree with their position. And a lot of times, even I take it one step further, Sarah, that sometimes I've had people that think that if they agree with the emotion, if they empathize with the emotion, that they say a lot of times, well, this thing that I disagree with shouldn't make you feel this way. Right. And we have to recognize we're not the other person. Like they have a right to feel however they want to feel. And when we can understand that emotion, we can empathize with that emotion, going, it's not okay. It sucks that you feel this way, right? It sucks that you feel abandoned. It's terrible that you feel depressed, or it makes you sad, or whatever it is. And we can agree that that emotion is hard and difficult, without having to necessarily agree with the event that happened, right? Or the content that happened. And I agree that a lot of people get that mixed up. And maybe say a little bit like, how do you, when you talk to your couples, how do you talk to them about how to show empathy, right? How do you talk to them about how to express an empathetic response to what their partner may be talking about?
So starting off, it's more or less trying to identify it for yourself, of actually being able to figure out what that emotion feels like for you. So it's easier for you to identify it than when you are trying to listen and understand and communicate. It's easier to then be able to do that piece and build that line of connection.
Yeah.
So being able to identify it in yourself, and then also remaining curious.
That's a huge one, I think. Say more about that one.
So being able to remain curious helps you understand kind of their position, their emotions, being able to, it's kind of like that string, like you're handing that person a string to build that connection and kind of continuing that thread together. Because when you are able to have that curiosity, you want to learn about them. You want to keep that line open. And that's a big piece of that communication and connecting.
That's really good. Yeah, I love that one because I think it goes, I think just even that piece goes a long way with if couples could add curiosity, their emotional connection would go way up because that curiosity says, tell me more about that. I don't fully understand that, like, and that's okay that I don't understand it, but just help me to understand what you're thinking. And being able to be on the receiving end of that a lot of times means we have to be okay with the idea that our partner doesn't automatically know exactly what we're thinking or feeling and shouldn't necessarily automatically know what we're thinking or feeling. That doesn't equate to love, right? It doesn't equate to love to say, this is 100%, me 100%. It's that I change, I grow. My partner is also curious about the ways that I'm changing and growing, the ways that I'm feeling, like, and that it can just be such a helpful position to take.
It's so important to remain curious because, I mean, you're not going to remain stagnant. You're going to change your opinions, your viewpoints. So being able to understand what that truly looks like and then accepting as that growth continues in your relationship.
That's exactly right. I love that. Let's give one more. I know you wrote about a lot, but give me one more about what you think is really important that couples do to be able to help grow their emotional connection.
So I would have to say a big one that's coming up for me, and this probably seems minor in reality because it's simple, right? But showing appreciation and gratitude in your relationship.
Yes.
It's easy to forget. We get into that routine, we get into patterns, or we look and break down as like moment to moment, living in the moment, or we look at long-term goals and we try to focus and make it to that next point. But we forget the in between. We forget to show that gratitude and that appreciation, and that really does flourish that vulnerability feeling.
Yeah, I love that because I think that is the whole foundation for emotional growth and care within a relationship. Because if you don't have that, it really kind of, anytime there's a complaint or a difficulty, it feels like scraping rock bottom. But as opposed,
it's always there, right? It's not recognized.
That's right. And I would say too, you tell me what you think about this, because I believe that showing appreciation and gratitude is more than just saying thank you. Right. I mean, thank you is important, but it's more than that, right? Do you see that? Do you see that with couples and feel the same way as I do about that?
Yeah, definitely. Especially when, like I said, it gets into that routine piece. So you just assume like it's done, right? We get into them. We're like, oh, we're setting new boundaries. Like you're known, you're supposed to be doing that. But in reality, it's not that case. So being able to just sit there in that moment of like recognizing that this individual doesn't have to do that. Like your partner doesn't have to do that. And showing that consideration takes that to that other level. Not just, oh, hey, thanks for doing that. But I really appreciate, like, that really meant a lot to me. That made me feel happy or excited. Like,
yeah, I think you're hitting on such a huge one there of saying like, this really made me feel whatever. It made me feel excited. It made me feel happy. It made me feel secure. It made me feel safe. Yeah. Like saying that, like, this really was exactly what I needed. And I think a lot of times I ask couples, I say like, okay, you have this problem that you're coming into therapy for. Can you go the next week and not talk about the problem, but just notice every single day, offer appreciation and gratitude to each other and see what difference the problem is in a week, right? And see where that is in a week. And a lot of times it's really hard to do. Like you talked about it, it feels simple, but it can be really challenging for folks to do that, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. So Sarah, I ask everybody when we do these, what is the one thing you want people to take away? Like, what is the one thing you would want couples to take away when we talk about growing their emotional connection between each other?
Overall, it seems like it's really complex, and that can be really overwhelming, that we need to do all these things in order to have an emotional connection. And then a lot of times it becomes avoidant because it's something we don't want to focus on. It's just easier to be in our routine because that feels safe. So being able to even utilize a few of these, maybe even one or two, it just opens the door up for you to be able to take those smaller steps to continue to have that consistency and stability in your relationship of that connection.
Yeah, I think sometimes we think it's big, huge, giant steps.
Yeah.
But I love what you're saying there of take the small steps, take them as wins. They matter, and the more consistent you can be with it, the more it's going to change things. Sarah, thank you so much. I think that is just so incredibly helpful for folks. And I know if you are in a couple partnered relationship and you're struggling, couples therapy is what we recommend. Most couples wait 6 years too long of dealing with a lot of struggles before they come into therapy. That's the average of what they wait. So we just really encourage you, whether it's with us or whether it's somebody else, get into couples therapy. It's good. It's hard. But we have amazing couples therapists like Sarah who can help you work on your relationship and move forward with that. So Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.